And I think there is no better guest than Christophe Mallet here from Exzeb, now Somewhere Else.
Absolutely.
Right? You are here, but you're also somewhere else.
I am somewhere else as well, yeah.
All right. You've been doing a lot of work on VR. Maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself and the work you're doing.
Yes, absolutely, Vitaly. So basically, Somewhere Else is a London-based creative agency. And what we do, basically, what we've observed, is there's a bridge, to be built between the brands on one side, who are very much talking about strategy, KPIs, objective, and have a very specific language, the language of sales, the language of money, and the VR makers on the other side,
right,
who know their craft, but not necessarily know how to talk. And we are in between to basically help brands make purposeful VR,
Yeah.
VR that's not kind of shoehorning concepts from last year from film into VR, but that really means something in that new medium.
Right, so would you actually say that VR is a thing, it's a mainstream, and that this is has become an established thing that also brands kind of want to have more and more?
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. So on one hand, my mom and my grandfather have heard about VR. Everyone has heard about VR. So 2016 was year zero for that. Like, the awareness is huge. There's about 90% of people in the UK who've heard about VR. But the people who have tried a headset, it's 7% of the population.
7, right.
And as part of the 7%, it's probably a minority who've tried real VR, such as the HTC Vive. And I say real VR not to be disdainful towards like cardboard and things like that. It's just saying that if you're watching a 360 video on your phone, or if you're playing a room scale tracking experience on your HTC Vive, even though they can both be called VR, it's not really the same medium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is mainstream in people's head, but the knowledge of it, the experience of actually playing in VR is still very, very minimal.
So also the differences between devices are huge, right? So what you can do with one VR experience is totally kind of impossible, or to some degree it's just different on different devices, right? We have Samsung, better than
Gear,
Gear, yeah, right, and Oculus Rift. And would you say that designing for this kind of experiences requires you to kind of reinvent what you have in mind, like the story that you're inventing in the beginning, for all those different devices? You can't just design a VR, you're designing VRs, right?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing to keep in mind is there are 3 levels, if you know, of VR, of distribution. The first level is entry VR. You can play 360 video on your phone, on your laptop, you probably have. It's not really immersive. There's a debate whether it's VR or not, which doesn't matter. What matters is you have 3 billion devices that are ready for it today. Then in the middle, you have mobile VR. And that's the Samsung Gear, that's the Google Daydream, that's the cardboard, everything you stick your mobile in a headset. And that right now is about 5 to 10 million headsets. And then at the very end of the spectrum, you have premium VR. And that's when you start having room scale tracking or controller tracking, and that's the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive,
right,
and the PlayStation VR. And depending on which of those tools you designed for, there's a trade-off between reach and interactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you want to reach a ton of people, you have to do a 360 video because you can put it on Facebook and on YouTube, and it's great.
Right.
But it's a 360 video. There's no interactivity. If you're going to design an experiential stunt for a brand, and you won't have full-on interactivity, you're going to do it for the HTC Vive.
Right.
But there's only about 500,000 HTC Vive that have been sold commercially, so you're not going to
Right.
reach people at home.
All right. So when it comes to brands, are brands kind of coming to you knowing that specifically they want VR? Is it something that has become easier to sell? Or is it kind of still very hard? Because how do you measure success of a VR campaign? Is it like social media outreach, or a company willing to invest into VR these days? Are they more skeptical about it yet?
I think they're very curious and excited, but on the other side, they're very unprepared to what's coming, and there's a lot of confusion, really. And what I think they need to understand is that VR is a very broad term. And what they can do. And in a way, the VR market today, for marketing, reminds me of social media circa 2010, when you had 10% of brands who wanted to be innovative and were doing social media for the sake of it, and you had 90% of brands who were still saying, well, this is a teenage fad.
Right.
And this is kind of where we are today, so there's a lot of education to be done.
So I guess as a VR designer, like the person who is creating VR experiences, you probably wouldn't say that VR is a fad. Is it a trend, or is it, in general, would you say that everything's better with VR? Or is it going to stay this encapsulated thing that's going to be used a lot in fashion industry and entertainment industry and music industry? Or is it going to, in your opinion, is going to become a widespread thing that's going to be used pretty much on websites all the time as well?
I think VR is here to stay. 6 months ago, everyone had the debate whether VR was like 3D TV. And VR is not a feature of any other medium. VR is a new medium in and of itself. It is to TV what TV was to radio, if you want. In terms of models and how VR is used, today you have very clear business models. In the real estate industry, in healthcare, in education, in training. Those are established models because of their convenience, because they're financially profitable, and those are here to stay. In entertainment, there's maybe a bigger question mark. And that's for two reasons. One is the tech is a bit clunky at the moment. So HTC Vive, you have to spend £800 for the headset, £1,000 for a great computer. You have to be rich to have a big living room and to be able to clear it out. It's complicated. So the tech is not here yet, but it's just the first wave of consumer headset. And on the other side is the content. Because you only have 500,000 Rift or 500,000 HTC Vive, not a lot of big studios have designed with like AAA content, simply because the market is too small. So all of that is going to evolve, and I really think that give it 2 or 3 years, VR will become one of the first mediums for entertainment for pretty much everyone.
Okay. Now moving back moving onwards to design part, because most of us people watching the stream are designers. So if you want to kind of move from traditional advertising work or digital design work, illustration and web design towards VR, what challenges should you be expecting? What are the kind of the complicated things that make designing VR maybe slightly more complicated, or moving or transition from traditional design towards VR more complicated? What are the things to keep in mind?
So I think the first thing to keep in mind is, and let's talk about true VR now, like room scale tracking, full immersion. The first thing is you're putting people in a new reality, dropping them in a new reality, and this psychologically means a lot. It means people have a fear of missing out. So people are going to look around. They're going to focus more on the visual than the audio at first. So you have to pace whatever your experience is a bit slower to allow for that. The second thing is, after fear of missing out, is fear of literally being eaten by a tiger, because this is how we are rooted in our DNA.
These videos like where people just drop on the floor because they're jumping somewhere. It's like we can see it all the time.
It's exactly so. You have to ease.
It's really immersive, right?
It is. It is immersive. It's called presence. So this is the psychological phenomenon by which your brain says, "All right, I'm there." But when you reach presence, indeed, people can be afraid. So you have to ease them in, and so. Really, there's this idea of audience experience design. That's when you really put the human at the center and say, okay, what is he going to receive cognitively speaking? So that's how you organize the information, and obviously it cannot be 2D or semi-transparent panel. It has to be more clever than this. But beyond the cognitive aspect, you have the emotional aspect. Is it fear, joy, excitation, sadness? What emotional outcome do you want your world to kind of induce, if you want? And the last one is physical. And the basic story, and we did the same, every single VR studio, their first video, they would have the camera in the middle and people around, all around in 360 degrees, which is stupid. Because we exist visually in that 360 environment, but I haven't looked behind me since I started talking to you, and neither have you. So the 360 canvas is important for immersion. It doesn't mean you have to use it all. It's just not natural physically. So you have to think about how human reacts. On the other hand, for sound is 360 all the time.
Right. But in the end, it's all about kind of embedding a story, because you as a storyteller, basically, right? You're embedding a story into this new space to allow users to, players, to kind of explore this environment, right? So what does it actually mean for designers? So you still design with paper first, and then you kind of have to move to this space, or you're designing more, rather than interfaces, you're designing now spaces. Is it correct to say so? Is it?
You're designing spaces. So what's interesting is when you talk about VR, the basic model of VR is creating an experience. So, and I'm meaning experience as opposed to information. conveying information might be done better actually into the or via screen. Conveying an experience, an immersive experience, is done better. VR is the medium of experience, not the medium of information. And when you do so, you're trying to tell a story. But there's a lot of storytelling tools that you have to give up. For starters, the field of view, for example, on a Samsung Gear VR is 96 degrees. But you have 360. So meaning at any given time, the viewer is only seeing 25% of the environment. So how do you tell a story when you don't know what the viewer is looking?
Exactly they're going to look at. Yes.
Exactly. So the first wave of VR directing, if you want, was a lot about like being a matador, like finding tricks to get people to look left and right.
To guide their attention to specific points.
Okay. So you're going to use sound, you're going to use movement, but I think it's the wrong approach. I think how does an architect direct the gaze of the viewer? The answer is they don't. They build a space, and I think it's exactly the same for VR. Don't try to guide the gaze of the viewer. Try to give him a space where naturally, wherever he wants to look, cognitively, physically, emotionally, something is going to happen. So I had a talk with Alex McDowell, who is the production designer on Minority Report. So a hero of all designers and so visionary. And what he said is, in the cinema world back then, you had the script. Someone would write a script, version 1, version 50, then the script is signed off, and then they give it to the production designer, and they're like, off you go, create a world. Create cities, create transportation, create entire UX. But the script is already there. In VR, it's the other way around. You create the world, the origin story of the world, the social rules, the economics of the place, how does it look, who lives there, when are we? And then you move into the character, into the story you want to tell. So it's really a reversal of the storytelling, traditional methodology, if you want.
Right. Interesting. So, based on the experiences that you had and you worked with really major brands, I don't know if I'm supposed to mention them, but you've been working with really big brands. So, if you because you spend so much time in this space, kind of designing for VR, can you share maybe one or two really tricks or techniques that you discovered the hard way? Maybe things you wish you'd learned or you'd known better before you started out, before you lost so much time or wasted so much effort on making one specific thing right?
I think there's a lot. The first one is what I told you about the 360.
Yeah.
Really thinking about how people behave in real life and not using the medium as a gimmick. You don't want people to break their necks. That's the first one. The second one is the use of audio. Because people are immersed in a new world, they will be visually, like the cognitive load, if you want, is going to be concentrated on the visuals and not necessarily on the audio. So it's hard to convey stuff through voiceover. It's easier to convey it through motion graphics and added graphics. And the last one that's interesting is what they call the Patrick Swayze effect. So Patrick Swayze, the movie Ghost?
Yes.
A lot of people say VR is fantastic, it's breaking the fourth wall. Because you are in that world, then you belong there. But if no one in that world is acknowledging your presence, you're actually not there. You're a ghost, just like a Patrick Swayze. And so if you're designing an experience that is basically first-person POV, you have to have the characters in the world acknowledge your presence quite fast. Otherwise, it breaks the immersion.
All right. So it's interesting that you bring it in. If we have any questions from the audience, I'm going to just jump in and look into what we have here. But I'm really curious about this connection between VR and AR. Do you see specific use cases when they can be used together, or will they mostly be used together, or is it just two separate fields? What do you see happening? Is there kind of a tight connection between them, which is really present in most of the work designers do out there?
I think they're in a way, they're sister technologies, but they're going to be used for widely a different usage.
Okay.
The vision that a lot of people have is that, with Magic Leap and mixed reality headset, is that in a few years from now, everyone will have one all-in-one headset that will do anything from absolute real reality to augmented, merged reality, all the way to VR, where you have full virtual. So it's a scale, if you want, from 0 to 100, as opposed to two separate technologies. VR will really be for isolating you in another world. So So it's actually escape from reality and share a new space with, with people for social VR experiences. Whereas mixed reality, augmented reality is the opposite. It's like making the virtual converge with the real and augment it. So I don't know if you've seen the viral image about the Pokemon Go app. There's this viral image, like drawing of a guy who's looking at his phone like this, and there's a Pokemon riding on his neck.
Oh, right.
And that the fact that we are the slave of that app in augmented reality. I think what's going to happen is actually quite the opposite. Is when you're going to have an augmented reality headset for 10, 12 hours a day, because you're going to work in it, you're going to communicate in there. It actually has the power to reconnect you to reality. I'm going to be able to look around in that room, and I would have, I could see there when the building was built. I could have information about you and where you come from, and scary but fantastic, because you're adding layers onto reality, layers of knowledge onto reality. And I think for designers that are fascinated by information, AR is going to be more on the information side, whereas VR is going to be more on the experience side.
Right, I see. That's really interesting. Always makes me think about Black Mirror when I hear about this kind of experiences. We have some questions coming in. One of them is from Adam, asking, how would you imagine browsing or integrating the web in VR?
The first question is why would you, if you know what I mean?
It's okay.
Let me rephrase that. Going back to information. What's interesting was information. Before Google, basically, to have access to information, you either have to have a degree, education, or to go to the library. Simple as that. In other words, you had to be rich. Okay? Now, with Google and internet in general, you have that access to information for everyone who wants, more or less for free. For experiences, it's a bit the same. VR is going to build a web of experiences. You want to be somewhere, you want to feel something, put on that headset, and you are going to be there. That's basically where we are. So, when it comes to bringing the web into VR, you have to think how would being 100% immersed in the information and disconnected from reality add in. So I know people are working on data visualization, for example, which can only make sense in a kind of room scale tracking interactive world. In that way, it makes sense. But if it's to turn the current heritage of websites into 360 ones, it is not going to work. And the few experiences of web VR that exist today are not really convincing, in my opinion.
Interesting. I have also a question coming from John, asking, why would Christophe say VR is going to be different to 3D, which has disappeared from broadcast TV sets? So why should we invest?
The answer to that is 3D TV was a feature of a TV. If you're watching Gravity on your 3D TV, or Gravity on your normal TV, you are still watching Gravity. Whereas, let me give you an example. There's this video in Japan of a VR experience where in the room you have a setup. It's a plank of wood, and people are working on it, and they have to save a cat. Okay, it's simple like that. Except in the VR, the plank of wood is suspended in the air, 200 meters over the city. 60% of the people did not save the cat in that VR experience. Now, if you were playing the exact same game on your TV, A, 100% of people would save the cat, and B, would be incredibly boring, right? And it's just an illustration of the fact that they are two completely separate mediums and ways of telling story.
Okay. Another question coming from Simon J. So in VR design, what is the next big hurdle? Or what is the main challenge that you have to solve every now and again, which kind of requires a lot of time and effort and potentially even costs so much?
I think the next main hurdle challenge was going to change everything is bringing social design into VR. At the moment, one of the...
You mean like integration with social media, or is it more interactivity between players, between people involved?
Yeah, interactivity between people involved. At the moment, it's a really... It's separating you from reality, right. and therefore it's such an isolating experience that we tend to not necessarily like it. And it's going to be interesting to see how designers can make a VR experience shareable. So you and I don't know, visiting Australia in VR, for example, but without your presence in that experience breaking the immersion.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I understand, because you also still want to have like the full rich experience, not to be, I mean, if you have like 3 or 4 people involved, then it might Well, you might need to design for that, right? Okay. And also, when it comes to this, I'm really curious. So if you have different devices, there is no way at the moment, at least, to to interact. Like if you're creating a VR, there is no way to connect with other people using a different device than the one that you're using, right? For example.
Yes, you can. You can. So VTime, for example, is a social app. VR Social is like Skype 3D in VR, if you want. And you can be on VTime from your Oculus and chat with someone who's on the gear, and probably soon on the cardboard or something similar.
Okay. And do you see lots of development happening there, or people are kind of trying to figure out the basics first? Kind of creating this really immersive experience in isolation, so to say, for the one person being immersed in this experience. I can imagine that it's quite difficult design-wise to arrange for this space design that would accommodate for an unlimited number of people.
I think what's interesting is finding the middle way. So VR is not WhatsApp. It's not a communication. You're not only there to communicate, but it's not a video game either, if you want. And there are some apps like the sports bar, for example, which literally is what it is. It's a sports bar in which you can walk around, play pool, cheers with people, throw darts around. And so it's not really a video game because you're not winning points or anything. There's no levels. There's no end to it. It's not only communication. It is a virtual space to hang around with people. It's not very interesting because sports bar exists in reality. But you can imagine it's that kind of third way that's interesting to explore.
All right. Maybe just a last question from Anna Udria. As VR grows, do you see it as becoming a social problem? Right now, people are socializing in real life less and less. How about then, if they can just be in this virtual world all the time?
So we're going back to Black Mirror a bit.
Black Mirror again, yes.
It's VR is a medium, and as a medium, it's value neutral. It is what the people make of it.
Yeah. So it's up to us, the designers, to actually figure out what to do with it. And we also carry responsibility for what we're designing in that, right?
It's all about responsibility.
But people are really good at using and abusing technology in all kind of ways. So
it's about, if you can create a habit of socialization, of people sharing all together, that is amazing. If designers can create experiences that are not isolating, but the other way around, taking the empathetic, power of VR to bring people together, it can be a fantastic tool to change minds.
All right. So, last question. Ready? What's your next dream project? Do you have anything that you would really love to work on? Maybe somebody who is working on just that problem is, watching now.
I think it's a bit superficial, maybe, but I just want the Daft Punk to give me a call.
Oh, really?
and to do a visual experience.
If you're watching?
Simply because of the music, obviously, what it could do with sound and spatialized sounds would be amazing. Also because of the visual, culture that they have, and finally because the whole theme of their body of work is man and robots and machine. And I think just having them syncing in VR would be fantastic.
So if anybody is watching who is even remotely connected to Daft Punk or anything
friends
of that kind,
them,
yes, please, send us a message in the chat window. Just call you directly. I guess you're not that difficult to find.
Not at all. No.
You're not hiding in virtual reality.
Absolutely not.
No. All right. Excellent. So thank you.
Thank you very
so
much
for joining us. All right. Excellent.